Hello, my name is Christina Miller. I'm the Solid Waste Planning Specialist with the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, Waste Management, and Radiological Protection Division. Today, I'm going to be recording one of the series of informational modules on the proposed legislative changes to Michigan's Solid Waste Management Law, which is Part 115 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. The modules are intended to provide an update to interested parties on the most relevant and recent version of the proposed changes. Please note that the legislative changes proposed to date are in draft form and are subject to further changes. This module will cover aspects of the proposed materials management planning requirements. So we're going to start the presentation just talking about planning. The general form of planning is basically determining the what, the why, the who, the how. You want to decide these things before you need it and identify goals and action steps. General steps of planning process are developing objectives, tasks, resources needed to implement the tasks, a timeline, and be able to track and assess your methods, finalize a plan, and distribute to all parties involved. So today, currently, we plan for waste management. We focus on landfill disposal capacity and making sure we have safe and long-term disposal. But our future, we're looking at focusing on materials management, looking at an integrated system, and looking at minimization, recycling, and a more sustainable approach. So looking at those, today, the current law, we have solid waste management plans, which really focuses on, again, landfills and disposal capacity. So it tells us where we can throw our trash away, whether or not we can site disposal areas, and who's responsible for monitoring and enforcing the plan. And although plans do include recycling and compost programs, they were not required to actually have a program, just whether or not that they were feasible for the county. But our future materials management plans are going to focus on different ways to manage our materials, where you can recycle and if you can compost, and looking at, have you looked at all management options first before you decide to expand at a landfill. You're also going to be able to look at how much materials have you diverted and whether or not you've been meeting your goals, and if there's any grant dollars out there that might be able to help you increase your recycling. So the overview of these plans essentially they'll identify all materials management facilities. So that includes all your disposal areas, your landfills, your municipal solid waste incinerators, all your processing transfer stations, but in addition, all the new materials utilization facilities such as material recovery facilities, compost facilities, and anaerobic digesters. So to the future, we'll be looking at utilization capacity, not just disposal capacity. And there'll be provisions in the law that are promoting regional planning, encouraging and requiring counties to actually talk to one another prior to developing their plan in hopes to actually for them to work together. And then the plans will also have, you'll be required to have goals for utilization and recycling, provide siting for of these new disposal facilities or materials utilization facilities, and have money available for that through materials management planning grants. And the new law at this point as proposed has no import or export authorization requirement, so which means your waste can go to any county without restriction. So focusing on what's the starting point. Planning areas, which could be a county or multiple counties, will need to see where they're at, where their starting point is. So they need to determine their population, their economic base, what their land use is. They're going to need to identify all materials management options for their region or their planning area, which again includes all of those material management facilities. And then most important is that they're going to have to inventory that capacity for those facilities to ensure that they actually have a place to send the materials that they're planning to utilize or recycle. They're going to have to determine their municipal recycling rate and their recycling access that's available to them. and provide an overview of their transportation infrastructure. So basically, they're figuring out their starting point. In addition, they will be required to have materials utilization goals, which I'll go into a few examples here in a second. But the steps will be needed. They'll need to identify the steps needed to increase their municipal solid waste recycling rate, increase recycling access through their benchmark recycling standard, and achieve other goals set by their county. So if you're interested in knowing or finding out more about the benchmark recycling standard, please look at that module when it's available. So how do they achieve these goals? They do this through what's going to be required as an implementation strategy. They're basically a set of action steps to make sure that they're able to meet their objectives. And also they need to make sure, as they're looking at all of their capacity available to them and looking at their goals, that they actually have the facilities that they need to achieve their goals and to manage their materials properly. So therefore, they may need to cite additional facilities, whether in their planning area or surrounding planning areas, to make sure that they have the capacity. So the implementation strategy is basically showing or giving you a way to show progress towards meeting these goals. And the focus is the reduction of organic and recyclable materials being disposed. You'll have to also have a description of your materials utilization goal resources and how the benchmark recycling standards will be met, and make sure that all of the materials management facilities are reporting annually to the DEQ. So the hopes are all facilities will be required to report to us annually, and the counties or planning area will be able to get that information from our system that we put it into, so you can utilize that to help show progress and to help you meet your goals. So again, this is a breakdown of what is required of material utilization goal. So benchmark recycling standards is essentially recycling access and education. Again, if you want to see more or know more specific information, see that module. But the municipal solid waste recycling rate, every county will have to find out where they're at today, and then what their future, look at their goals that they want to obtain. But the statute actually identifies a goal of 45% recycling rate and an interim goal of 30% by 2025. And the other material utilization goals set by the planning area are tailor-made for your planning area. They're not required. So if a county generates a lot of construction and demolition waste, they could identify goals and objectives to help reduce or reuse those materials as part of their goals in their county plan. But the focus will really be on the action steps, the deliverables, more than the goal itself. So as an example, in this particular example, we're going to increase school recycling. So the objectives I have identified in my plan is to increase awareness of the why we need to increase school recycling, determine the starting points and the progress, design the best program, and design the best program for the school. So again, these are the goals, and the way for us to show progress is to be able to demonstrate these things. And so I demonstrated these by meeting with school administration. I've held school assemblies and I identified when those dates were, surveyed materials needed managed, surveyed the progress at 6 months and 1 year, so you can keep track and make sure you're meeting those goals or make changes as needed. And then to design the best program, maybe we created a green team and to determine the types of materials, the space needed, and the education needed. So progress doesn't need to be hard, it just needs to be able, you need to be able to identify it. So with the materials utilization goals, there's two things to point out. The CBCs, or the County Board of Commissioners, certify the progress towards the goals every 2 years after the plan has been approved. in order to be eligible for the Growing Recycling Access and Voluntary Participation Program money. Again, I would look at that module to gain more information. But pertaining to this today, or for the future for materials management planning, annually, counties will get the opportunity to receive this grant dollars, which I'll go through in a second, as long as they're showing progress towards meeting their goals and or progress towards developing their plan and whatever is identified in their grant requirements. So it's an automatic dollar amount so long as progress is being made. And as I discussed earlier, counties will have to be able to cite facilities or be able to identify facilities where the materials are going. And there are two pathways for this in this new proposal. The first pathway is for all materials utilization facilities, again, your MRFs, your compost facilities, anaerobic digesters, and any exempt solid waste disposal area, which means that they're exempt from permitting and licensing from the department. So they're the smaller disposal facilities. They can follow the local zoning pathway. So as long as they meet local zoning, they would be considered consistent with their plan, and they would use that documentation to provide to the county so that they would be consistent. However, if they don't meet local zoning, or if it's a materials management facility that cannot follow that pathway, all those facilities must follow the citing process and meet the criteria that are outlined in the county plan. And just to make a note, the plan citing process does preempt local zoning, just like it does today. So we're moving from what the plan contains to how the process is, or what the process is to develop the plan, because there have been significant changes with that. So essentially, the materials management plan approval process starts with the county or CBC providing a notice of intent to the department. And once they provided the money or notice of intent, they are eligible for the grant dollars that I discussed earlier. And then at that point, a 36-month time clock starts to make sure the entire process is complete. So they have to draft the plan, have their meetings, and complete all approval portions of it in that 36-month time frame. And there are established time frames and default mechanisms in place so it does move along the process. And part of the approval is the materials management planning committee has to approve it. Then it goes to the board of commissioners for approval, and then 67% municipal approval, and then to the DEQ. So basically, this is how you get the plan done, which you can see in this flow chart. Again, it is a large flow chart. You don't have to look at all the details. The main thing to look at is that the green arrow at the top, where that's the start of the 36-month, because the county has provided the notice of intent, and the red arrow at the end that says that's the 36 months, and all those steps in between there. And the red dates are the time frames and default mechanisms. If it does not get approved or does not move or does not get done in that time frame, it moves to the next spot automatically until you reach the very last one where it has the red arrow. For municipal approval, you need 67% of the municipalities that either approved or disapproved the plan in a 120-day time frame in order for it to come to the DEQ for approval. And at any point in the process, progress is not being made, or there's decision, or you did not get approval from the municipalities, the DEQ would take over writing that plan. And in the case of multi-county plans, there's two things to know: that the Board of Commissioners of the planning areas will need to either form an authority or enter an agreement to ensure that they are in compliance with the statute, and there will have to include a process for citing in compliance with the statute. So it's not concrete, there's flexibility in there. Again, it's tailored to what your county needs or counties need when you're developing a multi-county plan. So who are the key parties, and who are they in charge of what, or who's in charge of what? The Board of Commissioners, the Designated Planning Agency, and the Materials Management Planning Committee, they're essentially the same entities that are responsible today. The Board of Commissioners are responsible for all aspects of the plan and plan implementation, regardless if the county writes the plan. The Designated Planning Agency administers and prepares the plans through the direction of the Planning Committee. So the Planning Committee is the entity that actually identifies the planning area's priorities and helps to direct the DPA for the plan preparation. So the DPA is actually the worker bee to make sure everything keeps going the way it needs to. The Planning Committee directs the priorities, and the Board of Commissioners implements. Some of the new responsibilities from previous law or current law is that the Board of Commissioners will automatically be responsible for plan implementation. So if they don't identify somebody, they will be the ones responsible. They will also be responsible for either citing any needed facilities or finding alternate materials management facilities outside of the planning area if capacity is needed. And then all the planning grant dollars at this point will flow through the county or counties if multi-county. The DPA, there's really nothing new with that. There's still the worker bees in the future as well. And then the Planning Committee, the MMPC, will approve the DPA's work program, and they will advise the county or counties and municipalities of again, the priorities. Because this, I'll go through the makeup of that in a second. The next slide, I think. Yep. So the Planning Committee is a group of stakeholders that are supposed to help direct and decide the priorities. And we have moved from a solid waste focus to a materials management focus. The Standard Committee is 11 members, and the makeup is a solid waste disposal facility operator, a managed materials hauler, materials recovery facility operator, a compost or other organics facility operator, waste diversion, reuse, or reduction facility operator, an environmental interest group, and then one county, one township, one city or village elected official, and an individual that generates managed materials, and one regional planning agency. And an optional, which would be a 12th member, would be an adjacent community business representative. And there are requirements in there for if the Planning Committee has determined that they need to develop, a compost facility or do an expansion in a landfill, or put in a MRF, that there is a 1 mile, 3 mile radius requirement that they would have to include additional representation from the adjacent community. And if you have a multi-county plan, you would have the Standard Committee plus the following may be appointed per additional county. So one elected county or municipal government official and one business that generates managed materials within the planning area. Again, the focus is moving from disposal to materials management. There's been in the past conversation about it's sometimes difficult for smaller counties or planning areas to get large quantities of people or large members, and there is a 7-member option that is available if those counties are not able to find the proper representation. And those which are not identified on here are two materials management industry, 2 environmental groups or regional planning agency, 1 elected county, 1 elected township, and 1 elected city or village. And there's a process in the statute that identifies how you would go about asking or requesting a smaller planning committee. So I mentioned earlier that there's timelines and default mechanisms in the process of approving the plan. Also, if any part of the process, again, if the county's not showing progress to getting it completed, if the county is not, or the planning area, once the plan's been approved, not working towards meeting their materials utilization goals and not being able to show progress towards implementation, then the DEQ would take over and prepare the plan for the county. And if that is the case, which is the last resort in our mind, these are the things that would take place. And these plans would have to be self-implementing and they would be developed by the DEQ, but implemented by the county Board of Commissioners. So these items are that all material utilization facilities or exempt disposal areas that comply with local zoning that have been included in our plan would be automatically consistent with the plan siting process. No additional solid waste landfill disposal capacity will be approved, and all haulers will be required to provide recycling access per the benchmark recycling standard. Again, this would be our last resort, and it would have to be self-implementing. So this is not our first choice. So we believe that these plans will need to be reviewed, and in statute it has identified that they will be reviewed every 5 years, and to ensure that they are still in compliance with the statute, and then they'll need to be able to evaluate progress towards meeting your implementation strategy and the goals that have been identified. If you end up looking at it and the plan is not in compliance anymore, the county can initiate the process by filing a notice of intent to follow the process, or the DEQ could initiate the process. The DEQ would also initiate the process from the counties to amend their plan if there's new legislation introduced. Obviously, if there's a different policy in the department or in the state. But the other thing that's important to note is that counties can now, if they need to amend their plan to be able to increase their materials utilization or recovery of managed materials, that they could submit their amendment proposal directly to the DEQ, and we would approve it without having to follow the entire amendment process. If there's other changes that need to be made that do not do that, then the county would have to amend the plan and follow the process in that flow chart that I identified. So we believe, obviously, all of this has to be done with some money that goes to the counties to help pay for this. This proposal covers the cost of preparing, implementing, and maintaining the plans, and it would be $60,000 for each county and $10,000 for every county additional, plus 50 cents per capita up to $300,000 to help cover higher upfront costs initiating the new planning process, and would be available the first year. And these grants would be essentially given annually, so long as the county, again, is either showing progress towards preparing the plan, and once it is prepared, then they could use that money to implement their plan. So we have to show progress towards meeting your implementation and your material utilization goals in order to receive it. There will be additional support the way the legislation is written. There's recycling markets program and local recycling innovation programs that are not tied to the plan. Again, if you want to learn more about that, I would visit the grant module. And the recycling access and voluntary participation grant, you have to have an approved materials management plan in order to be eligible for that. And then you have that 2-year requirement that the Board of Commissioners has to review and show that they've met their implementation, or are meeting or showing progress towards meeting that implementation. So the question is why? Why do we need this materials management plan? It is the tool that we need to move us forward from a disposal capacity, from a disposal mentality, so we can protect our environment, so stop throwing away commodities that are valuable and hurting our animals and our environment. And I know Michigan can do better with the cooperation of and education with partners, business, residents, the public, private, all of them. We can do better. We will do better. And I believe that. So I appreciate your time today. If you have questions, please contact Liz Brown at browne@michigan.gov. Also, the flow chart and some other handouts will be available either upon request or we'll send it out when we send out these tutorials. Thank you guys and have a great day.